from my mic?
It's a pretty rudimentary process. You don't have to record yourself.
All right. Well, some places they like you too, and I just wanted to check and not screw you guys over by not doing it.
We aren't what you would call professional grade.
Okay. This isn't bad. There's all three of us. We got our little boxes.
We are guerrilla style podcast.
Oh, very nice.
Okay, you'll hear yourself. I'm just sharing the link right now before we start recording it.
Great.
We started doing this. Dave moved to Meriden, Connecticut to work at ESPN.
Oh, cool. Congratulations.
Well, this was many years ago. The story's not over. He moved there, and we started crossing state lines to record the episodes. That was where the name came from. And then that became untenable about 3 episodes in. So we kept the name. And
it's a good name.
Yeah, we do. Thank you. We do like the name. Our friend redesigned the logo for us, which thankfully it looks, like a 4th grader didn't design it, which is also helpful.
Nice. And still this goes across. And Jacob, are you in Rhode Island or Massachusetts?
I am in Rhode Island. Dave is the Stoneham native.
Got it. Indeed. What year did you go to Stoneham High?
I did.
We can save it for the thing. We're live though, right?
We are live.
All right.
Nobody may be watching yet, but we're live.
That's all right. Dave, when did you graduate?
I graduated in 2012.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I was 03 as an old.
03.
Yeah.
Did you have Bob Powers for gym?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The greatest.
Yeah.
A mystery and enigma. There's lore that I don't know if this rumor persisted. I think it might be true that he briefly held a world powerlifting record, like competitive powerlifting, and he held the record, and then the guy after him beat his record. Like I forget what competition it was, but he held the record until the next guy went up, which is but still, what an accomplishment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy to have any world record for any amount of time. Is that's the most insane thing I can imagine.
It's incredible. And also to set the scene, when you think world powerlifting record, this guy's like 5'4".
Yeah,
he's a little dude.
Tall.
Yeah. But he's a PE teacher, and he would talk to you and he would start mumbling and then walk away and then kind of come back and go, huh? And you would have to just have filled in the gaps.
Yeah, I remember the first time I met him, he was talking or whatever, and he just started walking the other way, and he went out the door, and he was like, and I was like, what, am I supposed to follow him? Am I supposed to follow him? And he comes back, and he's like, come on, Dave. I was like, oh, okay.
Did you play, because he was like an assistant football coach, I think, too, while I was there. Did you play football?
I did, but by then he had been replaced.
Got it.
But I had him for gym for 3 years, so he knew me, and I did his weightlifting program in the summer.
Oh, cool!
Yeah, so great. I knew him pretty well. Yeah,
I love that dude.
Oh yeah, he's awesome. He's given a lot of time and money to the school, so he's been a big help for everybody.
That's really sweet.
But he's so funny though.
So funny. He's like such a character. Like in addition to being like a good guy, but he's like. I was just thinking about this the other day, and I don't know why, but while I was in high school, his mother passed away, and I remember a couple of friends, and I think a friend who was on the track team and had him as a track coach, and then a couple of us that just had him for gym went to the wake, which it didn't occur to me at the time how anomalous that was to go to the wake for a teacher's family member. But that's just how attached to him people were. People really, I think we really liked him. And when they put out the news, hey, there's a viewing or whatever, for Coach Power's mother, we were like, oh, well, we've got to go. And so, which was such a, it wouldn't have occurred to me to do that for any other teacher if they had a death in the family, or not many others at least.
Yeah, there's very few that you feel connected to like that, and for whatever reason, he had that effect. He could tell jokes and stuff, and he made fun of a lot of kids too. It was kind of funny. But he did it in a nice way. He wasn't ever mean or derogatory or anything.
No, I think he was a very nice guy, and but he's so hard to explain because all the parts of, I mean, the like rumors about him, we would just joke about it, like the Bill Bradsky SNL sketches with Will Ferrell and Tim Meadows and them, because that's what it felt like. Everything you'd hear about this guy from like before you were in school. So there's the powerlifting thing. Some kids swore that during a football game, the team messed up and he took a full Gatorade jug, like a full sideline Gatorade jug, and just hucked it 50 yards. That was like the legend that we were told.
I would not doubt that.
Our three famous alumni went to a school called Pilgrim High School in Warwick, Rhode Island. Our three famous alumni are Chris Terreri, who is a Stanley Cup winning goaltender.
Cool.
Dan Wheeler, the former relief pitcher in baseball.
Yep.
And James Woods.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, it's a bit of a checkered relationship there.
We have Nancy Kerrigan and Mario Cantone.
Oh my God. Blow us out of the water right there.
That's it. I think that's all we got.
Hey, that's still, I mean, Chris Terreri's good. I mean, I just try to reach out to Chris Terreri for a story. I'm a reporter in my day life. And I reached out to him for a story back when I was still doing sports, and that guy never got back to me. I was so disappointed because he's big and famous now. He's Mr. Assistant Goaltending Coach or whatever. But
for whom? Where did he win the cup for?
I believe, Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was with the Devils.
I'm pretty sure he won it with the Devils. What was it?
I mean, was he? No. But he was obviously riding Pine for those championships,
right? Because they had Brodeur.
Martin Brodeur.
Got it.
Was one of the best goaltenders of all
immediate time. First ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what? Riding Pine.
But it's one of those things, right? Where like there's like a lot. It's like easy to joke about like, oh yeah, he was like the backup goaltender. He didn't even see the ice. But you're like, to get in that position, it's like, it's the same. It's like holding the world record till the next guy beats you. Right. It's so impressive. Like when you think about it, when you think about how few people have held that record, or like how few people are in that position to like get I guess they must do rings in hockey as well, right? To like win a championship ring and like hold the cup. And even if you didn't play in the series that the championship was clinched.
Right. So you might hear yourself talking for a second. I recorded a snippet of that chat just to make sure we're all sounding good. So cool. Play that back for a second.
The like rumors about him, we would just joke about it, like the Bill Bradsky.
Let me fast forward to Dave talking.
In school. So there's the powerlifting thing. And he took a full Gatorade jug, like a full sideline.
That's that goes on Patreon. I'm just kidding. We don't have one. This alumni went to Warwick, Rhode Island. Our three famous alumni are. I gotta go back to find Dave because I don't think Dave talked about that whole thing. But once I find Dave, we can get going.
I'm just running my mouth.
Where were you?
I remember hearing that story about Powers.
They had a death in the family, or not many others, at least.
Yeah, there's very few.
You're good. We found you, Dave.
Yeah, that's so funny.
That's pretty good.
It's like such a. Go ahead.
I did, my senior year, going into college, or after senior year, I did a program with my friends that played football and did track, and he ended up working with us for the summer. And there was one time he was painting the weight room, and we were about to walk out, and all of a sudden he comes down the hall and he's like, "Hey, did you guys see the new Expendables movie? Really good. Chuck Norris really kicked some ass." And I was like, "Wait, what?"
Chuck Norris.
Wait, what?
So funny. There's so many people. There's so much. This isn't not to just like derail the whole thing and talk hometown shit in front of somebody that's not from our hometown. But there's like so many little weird things that are like Stoneham High School specific, and then Stoneham specific, and then Massachusetts specific, where like my wife came to visit my folks over Christmas. We went up and saw my parents for a couple days, and I was like, we walked by Liberty Bell, the roast beef place, and I had to like explain to her the Massachusetts phenomenon of a restaurant that what they have is roast beef and seafood, and she was like, "What the fuck is that?" Those don't even go together.
Oh, it's so bizarre. No one understands this.
It's so specific, and you're like, And every place says they're like famous, like Liberty Bell famous roast beef. And the only real famous one is Kelly's. And that one, that's like the prototype for a roast beef. Like it's Kelly's roast beef, but you also could go there for like a clam strip roll. And it's and to like explain that to someone who's not from like central New England, it sounds bananas.
Yeah. Oh, all right, God. Let me start us recording so we can get all the good stuff on record.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, you'll hear our fantastic intro music playing in a second. It is one of the only two rules of the podcast. We respect our great made in 10 minutes intro music. Maybe somebody can remake this for us too. But anyway. All right. So 3, 2. What up? What up? It's Crossing State Lines, episode 155. We've been pumping out the content recently, but we took a bit of a slow week this week, just our regular trivia contest, and then this episode. But is it a special one? So Dave, you are here with me, my co-host with the co-most. Dave, what is up?
Not much. We've been looking forward to this one for a little while, actually, right, Jake?
We have Dave, and let me tell you what. There are many ways to describe our guest today. We have Emmy winner, we have writer, we have producer for Desus Mero, the #1 show in late time. Also worked on Last Week Tonight. He hosts Make My Day, the podcast, which I listen to, and it's very good. He wrote Nice Try. Is it Dancing in the Daytime, Josh?
Dancing on a Weeknight.
God damn it.
You're very close. It's such a nonsense name. That's how also Last Week Tonight was for like years. For like the first 3 years of the show, people would be like, hey, I like your show this week whenever. And it's like, I don't know, close enough.
I had everything else down. But he is also a Stoneham native. And that is the first time Dave's had the pleasure of talking to one of those in 105 episodes. It is Josh Gondelman. Josh, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So,
it's a pleasure to be here.
No, it's fantastic having you. And we talked a little bit. Well, it wasn't off air technically because we're live right now, but we talked before we started recording about a lot of the inside baseball stuff about Stoneham and how I always tell Dave, I joke and say he's a Stoneham Hall of Famer. He has a statue built outside the high school for being an outstanding football player, a top tight end.
Are you in the Hall of Fame?
No, I'm not.
Because there is,
there is a Hall of Fame though, Jake. There is.
And there's like, I remember seeing the track records. I went to school with someone with 3 older sisters, and she was a great athlete, my friend Karen, and her older sisters like had the track records that they like paint above the doors to the gym until someone beats them, they paint over it. Yeah,
they just paint over it. That's their advanced system.
They just white out. They take white out from like someone's desk.
Take it away with the paint scratcher and just put white out in.
And it all started one episode. I don't even know. I think it was just a random filler episode we did today. We were looking up people from our hometowns. And when I looked at Stoneham, I was like, holy shit, Josh Gondelman's from Stoneham of all places. I know you're a Celtics fan and a big Boston sports guy. So I was like, he must be from the area. But I was like, holy shit, he's from, and Dave was like, no way, really? And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty dope. So naturally,
thank you. I am a notable resident on the town's Wikipedia page, which is very generous.
Fun fact, somebody once edited the Pilgrim High School Wikipedia page to say I was the principal.
That's not bad.
It was not me. I promise you. I don't know how to do that. So, but anyway, so Stoneham, Mass. If you could describe Stoneham, Mass in one word, Josh, what would it be?
Gosh, did Dave freeze or is he just sitting very still and attentive?
He might have frozen.
Okay.
This happens sometimes.
That's all right. Stoneham in one word. I would say suburb. It's like deeply suburban. There's like a little strip mall, and like I walked to my middle school, and the one middle school in town. And that's like, if you want to paint a picture, I would say suburb. Yeah.
There's a lot of suburbs around in Warwick too. I'm sure.
Yeah. Not that it's like that distinctive, but it's the word. It's the single word that paints the clearest picture.
No, it's true. I get that. And I've only been to Stoneham one time. I went to go visit Dave back in October when you could go see people at any time you wanted to.
I remember that.
Yeah, those were great times. and we did a little horror movie marathon. But I went down there, and there's that nice. What is the name of the village? There's like that nice little village with the movie theater, Dave, that we drove through on the way to Papagino's.
Oh, that's Stoneham Center.
Stoneham Center.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I like Stoneham Center.
Talking about the theater. Stoneham
yeah,
Theater,
it's not a movie theater. It's like a theater theater. Like
yeah,
theater. Yeah.
Right.
And Papagino's, maybe I don't know if you had this, Dave, but when I moved to New York, because I went to college in Massachusetts, I went to Brandeis, and then I moved to New York, and I referenced Papagino's because to me, when I grew up, there were as many Papagino's as Pizza Huts. So I was like, Papagino's, one of the foremost pizzeria chains in America. And I was like, like a Papagino's. And people were like, you rube, you goddamn hillbilly. What is that? And I was like, oh, I guess I only know of it because there was one 2 blocks from where I grew up.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about like pizza places, and it's hard to know who has what. Like, I remember the first time I left New England. Yeah. And I was like, oh, we'll just go to a Dunk's. Like, my dad's like, I need coffee. And I'm like, we'll just go to Dunk's. And he's like, we're not in New England. There's no Dunk's over here.
Yeah. I've lived in New York City for 9 years as of this month. And I've never lived more than 1 block from a Dunk's, which is like preposterous. It's so towny of me, and it's like not on purpose, but it's just always happened. I've always lived like a Dunk's at the very end of my block. But like when I go to other places, I don't know where. I like Starbucks is fine, but I don't have a place that I like trust. In the Midwest, I'll go to like a Caribou maybe because I travel a lot for stand up. But like I try not to make. I just don't think like Starbucks isn't. That's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, their coffee is very strong too.
Much stronger.
Yeah,
I like a lot of weak coffee. A huge quantity of weak iced coffee. That's what I want all day.
Everyone I know puts like all the milk and sugar in it, and like they want it super, super light.
Yeah. Give me a large regular, light and sweet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's like, oh man, I love it. I converted my wife to Dunkin' Donuts. And she was already Jewish, but I converted her to Dunkin' Donuts.
And Jake, one thing, Josh, I don't know if you know this too. I think Stoneham for a little while had a record for most Dunkin' Donuts in like 4 square miles.
Oh, yeah.
We had 5 Dunkin' Donuts in Stoneham at one point.
That's right.
And Stoneham's only like 4 miles long. It's 3 miles long.
It's so small. And if it weren't for the like Spot Pond and the Fells Reservation, it would be even smaller, right? Like, because much of the town is like kind of physically big compared to how few people live there, because it's only like in the mid to low 20,000s of people, 23,000 I think when I was growing up. And so, but it's like kind of big considering that, and it still had so many Dunkin' Donuts. There was the one opened up in the Stop and Shop, there was one by 93, one by the high school that was after I left, one on two on Main Street, two on Main Street, one in Redstone. Yeah, there's just like all over the place. It's so many Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts closer together than you need any facility. Like there are people with private residences that you could plop their house down and it would encompass 2 of the Dunkin' Donuts in Stoneham.
They literally be like a quarter mile away from both of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's true. So and going back to Papagino's for a second, there was a Papagino's right, because I wasn't the same way. My friends all knew what it was, but they, for some reason, unlike me, didn't adore it. And I was like, it's my favorite place to go, like, ever. I love Papagino's. I used to just get their breadsticks and eat that for dinner.
Yeah.
I love them so much. So there was one about maybe a mile and a half from where I grew up. When I grew up, but we moved to a different house, and it was about a mile and a half, and they opened one up right at this area called Hoxie Four Corners. And when it closed down, my family and I were texting one another like somebody died. It was like, did you hear the news? I'm like, what happens? Like the Papagino's closed. I'm like, no way. It was like every time family came down, we would go there because it was easy, cheap, right around the corner. And then all of a sudden, it was just like an absolute like gut punch that place closed down. And there's only one really left in the area of us. It's a real shame because I really do. I will defend Papagino's till my dying breath.
Same. The one in Stoneham is a Papagino's D'Angelo, which is like two very new. It's like the Pizza Hut Taco Bell of just Massachusetts.
There's one of those in Stoneham, yeah.
Yeah. It's right on Main Street. The pizza place we would go to. This is like real small town shit that I love. The pizza place we would go to. Did you ever go to Angelo's, Dave?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the great pizza place, and they had like, it was like a pizza place on one side and then like a fancier Italian restaurant on the other side. And we would go there and we would order the pizza, and we never did delivery. It was close enough that we could walk and carry the pizzas home. So my dad, would walk me there, and I would order, for some reason when I was a kid, I would eat meatball and olive pizza. And I was probably the only person in the whole town that would order that. So when my dad would call it in, Sal, the guy that owned it, who's great, would give an extra meatball in a little Tupperware, and he would hand us the pizzas, and then he would like kind of take the Tupperware from behind his back, and he would go, "A meatball for the boy."
That is real small town shit.
That's like so specific that he like knew what from the order. Because we didn't give the address, because we would just go and pick it up, so he would just know from the order that it was us, and he would have an extra meatball, which is like so charming. I love being a regular anywhere.
Oh
yeah. They make you feel. I don't know have you been to Andrew's, the convenience store right near South School? Yeah, That guy knows me. I went in right before quarantine. It was like February, I think, and the guy's like, "Oh, hey, how old are you now? Like 18?" I'm like, "No, I'm 26, man. I'm old now."
That's so funny. Oh yeah, God. I love it.
I would, as much as Dave I know would love to talk about Stoneham.
Sure, we got to do pop culture rivalries
for a couple hours. So before we get into it, Josh, you ask questions every week on Make My Day, so I want to ask one of you.
Please.
I gave you a list of idea topics. Why did you choose this one?
I just love. I love heated arguments that don't matter.
No,
that's what I immediately, and I'm not an expert in anything, and so I knew there were at least like enough pop culture rivalries that I could like get mad about without knowing them very much, and so that I like that. Yeah, like someone tweeted one at us, and I was like, oh, that was my first thought. I don't want to spoil it, but I was like, that's the one that is like my favorite pop culture rivalry.
So before we get into it, there are three things Dave and I disagree on very vehemently. Probably the most intense arguments we get into on this show. The first and oldest one is that Dave hates Wayne's World and I love Wayne's World. That is our biggest disagreement. Dave hates the movie. Doesn't think it's funny at all. Second one, I hate George Costanza and think he's the worst character on Seinfeld. Dave loves George Costanza. Every other
George is the best.
Okay. So this is an interesting question, because I love George Costanza the character, but I would hate George Costanza the real person.
Oh yeah, I think anyone that plays that character is the most annoying person.
So that character, right? Like if there was a guy at my office who like built the like a nap crate under his desk to sleep in while everyone else is working, I'd be like, this fucking guy. But such a great TV character.
I would hate him. And then the third one, which oftentimes is the it's actually a newer one, but it's the one that really is the dividing line, because most people agree with me on Wayne's World, most people agree with Dave on George.
So this is a tiebreaker.
Dave thinks the audacity. He thinks Jumanji is a bad movie. And I can't.
Which Jumanji?
The Robin Williams original Jumanji. The classic kids film, Jumanji.
Okay. So I've only seen it once, and it was under interesting circumstances. It must have been my 10th or 11th birthday, and we saw it in theaters for my birthday party, and I was really sick, and I didn't realize it at the time. And so when there was like an earthquake in the jungle, and my legs were shaking because I was feverish. Right. So I remember the movie as being incredibly realistic for that specific reason. So I can't rule on it. I remember it being a movie that I had a very strong response to, but again, I haven't seen it in probably 25 years.
Well, I have seen it every time it's on TV.
I'll give Jake this. Anything with Robin Williams, I like Robin Williams, the actor, so I like his performances, but I don't like the movie. I don't think it's a good movie.
Really? Did you like Wild Hogs?
I thought
he was in Wild Hogs.
Wait, no,
was he?
No, was it Wild Hogs?
That was Tim Allen.
That was John Travolta too. What was the one he
John
was
Travolta.
Was it Old Dogs? Was that the one he was in?
Was he in either one? I don't know that he was in either one.
Oh, hold on one second. This requires Robin Williams bad movies.
Wow, starring Old Dogs. He was in Old Dogs.
Thank you. I get those two mixed up.
Of course, everyone does.
For whatever reason, they have this.
Travolta was in both.
That's unfortunate. I mean, he's also. Yeah. I mean, I will not hammer John Travolta too much in this podcast because he is still grieving, obviously. But
that's true. Yeah,
he has had quite the run, that's for sure. But anyway, Josh, you are the guest. You can decide where you want to start first. You want to start with video games, television, or movies?
Let's start with video games.
Okay, good, because that's my weakest one by far.
Okay, we can start with a different one.
No. I like to get the weak ones out of the way.
We don't have to do all these. There are a lot of good ones, though.
Yeah, we'll hit on the best ones, the ones I actually know what I'm talking about. Preferably.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with, and you guys all have the list in front of you, so we can just rotate and we can each pick once. I'm going to start with the one that is the genesis of this episode, the one that I knew and thought, this is the reason I want to do it, and that is Scorpion and Sub-Zero, which is from Mortal Kombat. Now, Dave, I know you know nothing about Mortal Kombat at all. Josh, are you familiar with the series at all? Okay.
I am, yes. Sorry, I was nodding because I thought you were muff, and I was like, this will translate on the podcast.
No, it's okay. But Dave, let me explain it to you as briefly as I can. So Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Scorpion comes from a clan called the Shirai Ryu. Sub-Zero comes from the Lin Kuei. They're rival clans. Sub-Zero's clan wiped out the entire Shirai Ryu, killed Scorpion's family, killed him, and then Scorpion. This is the first Sub-Zero because there's two of them. The first Sub-Zero is named Bi-Han. So he's like real vicious, real tough. So he kills Scorpion, the whole clan. Then Scorpion meets Sub-Zero at the Mortal Kombat tournament, kills him, rips out his spine. He's dead. His brother comes to replace him. His name is Kuai Liang. And then they fight, and I think Kuai Liang wins that one, but I can't remember. But anyway, he kills him. Then he kills his whole clan. Then he kills him, rips out his spine. He turns into like this undead zombie named Noob Saibot. And then they're like, in the current canon, they're like sort of friends, but there's still distrust between them because, you know, like all the
murders.
Yeah, all the murders kind of die hard, no pun intended. But it's the rivalry that's resonated with me the most out of a lot of these because there's just a blood feud between them, and it's really, I mean, they've been around since the beginning of the game. They're two of the original 7 characters, and I mean, the movie didn't really translate it that well, but I mean, when they rebooted the franchise, they chose the two of them to be on the cover. So they know these two are hated rivals. So that's my spiel on Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Josh, I know you.
This is so much more than I knew.
That's from watching the game stories and movies more than I'd like to admit, and playing the games more than I'd like to admit. But it's a very hectic one, yeah.
Here is the this is what I know of their rivalry as a game player of the like old Mortal Kombat, the original one and the second one. Scorpion, right? His kind of signature move is he shoots a hook out into his enemy that drags him to him, and he goes, "Get over here!" And yeah, that's Scorpion's move, and he drags him over, and then you uppercut the guy, or you kick him in the face. It's very effective, terrific, violent. Sub-Zero, his signature move is he shoots kind of a puddle of ice down in front of him. And if the enemy, you kind of entice your enemy onto the ice, and then he slips, and then you uppercut him and kick him in the face. I always liked the finesse of Sub-Zero. I found the get over here to be slightly obvious and gauche. And I liked the puddle of ice because it was like, all right, your move, big guy. I thought it was a little more subtle. I thought it was a little more artful. I wasn't good at this game, but I like the optimism of kind of having a subterfuge with this ice rather than the brute force of like shooting a hook into a guy's chest and dragging him towards you. So that's my attachment to this rivalry. But I could easily be swayed because you know the backstory, and I was just going from from my lived experience.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at, I mean, they're both pretty tortured souls. I mean, that's not even counting the fact that they both spent time as things called revenants, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with Quan Chi.
That's a bear that had sex with Leonardo DiCaprio.
That is. So other than that, a revenant is an undead servant to a sorcerer named Quan Chi. But anyway, that's way too much story to get into. But
I've never known any. Do you take notes on the cutscenes?
No, I don't. But I again, I've played the games and watched the movies so much that I've also been really into the franchise for a long time, like before I was probably allowed to play the games. But before we move on, I will say I'm actually more of a Scorpion guy. I love Get Over Here. I ran a poll on Twitter one time of what's the more iconic phrase from the game, either Get Over Here or Finish Him, and Finish Him did win the poll decisively. But
Finish Him is like, that's the classic. But Get Over Here, if Finish Him is the Buddy Holly of Mortal Kombat, then Get Over Here is the sweater song.
That's fair. That's fair.
That would two classic Weezers.
That would resonate more with me if I liked Weezer.
Okay, that's fair. Well, look, how are you also 26?
Yes, Dave and I are the same age.
Okay, so it's much harder to like Weezer. I'm like of a Weezer liking age and hairline, and I think that there's like it's at a level, because if I'm like 9 years older than you, it's like me. I'm trying to think of it's like me liking Van Halen in a way that's like deeply familiar rather than just like generally knowing that they shred. You know what I mean? It's like there's just like that decade of distance is enough that like Weezer still exists, but not in the form that I remember loving as a teen.
So I'm gonna rifle through a few that we don't have to spend any time on because I have no goddamn idea what they're about. I found one called Cloud versus Sephiroth. That's a Final Fantasy one. I want to mention it for fans of the franchise. I've never played it. Assassins versus Templars. That's Assassin's Creed. I played that game for about 10 minutes and lost interest. Just not for me. Mm-hmm. Solid Snake versus Liquid Snake. That's Metal Gear Solid. Another game I have also never played.
But I was kind of, by the time that those Metal Gears, I've seen friends play them, and I think they seem really compelling, but I was kind of out of the game of video games by then. Yeah.
That's fair. And I mean, I know Dave won't have much to say on most of these because Dave is not much of a gamer. Okay. So we'll, Dave, if you want to jump in, you can, because I know that there's a couple retro ones you might be interested in.
Let's do the ones that we feel strongly about. There's Mario versus Bowser.
That's a good one.
I think everyone gets. Yeah, everyone knows that one. That's. I mean, how many games are there with Mario and Bowser in them? Like 1,000? I mean, there was. I remember when I was younger, I played Paper Mario.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're actually releasing a new one for the Switch now. If you have a couple $100,
oh, cool! I have a Switch.
They're releasing a new one for that. Dave, if you have the enticement to buy, if you could find a Switch, it doesn't matter. They're pretty much sold out. But yeah, Mario Bowser, I like Mario. I've always been more of a Luigi guy. I mean, they're not really rivals, but I've been more of a Luigi guy. But
tell me more about your Luigi. Your affinity for Luigi.
I like the color green. That's really what it comes down to. That's why I like Yoshi. I like Yoshi.
I love Yoshi. Super Mario 2 for the NES was the one where they were most different, because I think that was not originally a Mario Brothers game. And then they kind of put the Mario Brothers characters on top of it for the American release. I think it was a different game in Japan. And all the characters you could choose, it was Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, and maybe Toad, but they all jumped very differently. And Luigi had this kind of high floating jump, and Mario had a jump that was more bounded by the laws of gravity. And so that was the time that I remember the most different. Otherwise, Luigi was like slightly taller. He was player 2 in the old games. And I liked them both, but I think the color green, that's like a big point for Luigi.
I love the color green. That's why I like Yoshi too.
Yeah, Yoshi's great.
I kind of like Bowser better though. Bowser's just, especially when you're playing Mario Kart, Bowser just knocks you right off the road. You never want to get.
He barely fits in the car though. He barely fits in the car.
It doesn't matter.
He does barely fit in the car.
Well, Donkey Kong doesn't.
He's powerful. Yeah. You'd think they could drive bigger cars.
Yeah, they should be getting like a Jeep or a pickup truck. They get like a go-kart.
They all get the go-karts, which I guess is for fairness, but it seems so dangerous. He barely fits. It seems like an accident he's just asking for trouble.
I feel like Bowser couldn't back onto a curb. I feel like he couldn't like back on like parallel park on a curb. I feel like he wouldn't be able to see.
Imagine Bowser doing a 3-point turn in that go-kart.
It'd be like Austin Powers.
I know. Just all the back and forth.
And really side note, it's one of my mom laughs every time she sees that fucking scene. Every time. So Bowser, I put down one that's very close to my heart, which is Red versus Blue or Ash versus Gary, or whatever one you want to say in the Pokemon series. They're always butting heads. That could be a TV one too, but I mean, Red versus Blue is like that one's carried on between the second generation and generations beyond that and the remakes. So that one is just near and dear to my heart. I want to park on the Grand Theft Auto curve for a second. I'm not sure if you've played the series, Josh.
Only a very little bit, but I'd love to talk about it.
So Grand Theft Auto, there are two games. I'm more of a San Andreas fan. That is the one. So the rivalry there is Carl versus Officer Tenpenny, who is voiced by Samuel L. Jackson in the game. Okay. And he's fantastic, of course. But he's like an extremely crooked cop, and he like tries to get Carl killed, and his partner is crooked too. And a large portion of the game is you going after him and trying to end him in the game. And eventually it's an interesting ending how it happens. I don't know if I'm fully satisfied with the ending, but the rivalry throughout the game was pretty good. And then the other one I'll touch on is Tommy Vercetti versus Lance Vance. That's Vice City. Lance is Tommy's friend. Then he turns on him and stabs him in the back. And Lance always wanted to kind of be what Tommy was, but it never really worked out for him, and he ends up dying in the end. So, that's what happens to bad people. Sonic versus Mario. This is a big one.
This is an interesting one because they didn't run in the same game. You'd think it would be Sonic versus Dr. Robotnik or Ben Schwartz versus Jim Carrey. But in this case, right, we're talking rival platforms, really. We're talking Nintendo versus Sega. They're the avatars for that bigger battle. Right.
Did you have a preference? Did you play both the games, Josh?
I liked Sonic, but I was always a Nintendo household. So I side with Mario based on experience, but I have no animosity towards Sonic.
Well, let me tell you what. I think in the film department, Sonic has the edge.
You think the Sonic movie is better than the Mario Brothers movie?
Well, I think one's easier to watch. That's for sure.
Sure.
I think I made it through the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. I don't think I'll make it through Super Mario Brothers.
I saw Super Mario Brothers in theaters.
Did you really?
I did.
What kind of experience was that?
I was a child, so I was like, this fucking rules. But like,
that's true.
That's the only way to see it. Like once you go from 13 to 14, like on your 14th birthday, you just can't do that anymore. You're not allowed to watch the Mario Brothers movie.
No, that's fair. And I remember that was the same way I thought about like Goldmember. I was like, oh my God, dude, Goldmember's the funniest movie I've ever seen. Then I rewatched it down and I'm like, that is easily the worst of the three. Like,
definitely the worst of the three. No doubt about that.
It's not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. So the only other one on video games that I can actually speak somewhat passionately about is Link versus Ganon, which is The Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
I played some Legends of Zelda growing up. My dad used to play it like downstairs on the old Nintendo in front of us, and like
my dad did that too.
Super into it. Like I don't know what it is about that game, but my dad just locked into it.
My mom made kept the maps for my dad. She would like take notes by hand in the original Legend of Zelda game my dad would play. So I must have been like 4 or 5, which would put my wife is about the age my parents were at that point, and it's a very sweet thing that they did together. I think if I asked my wife to be like, hey, will you take notes on this video game I'm playing, she'd be like, no, I'm gonna read a book.
Oh yeah, no, there's no way Emily would do that for me. Like, hey Emily, can you just like keep track of the story of Mortal Kombat 11 for me while I'm going? Like, I remember I started playing the game and I performed a move called a Fatal Blow, which is like a really graphic move in the game. And Emily walked in the room and she was like, oh my God, Jake, what are you playing? And I'm like, it's Mortal Kombat. That's the whole essence of the game.
Yeah, but, this is what I came for.
That's exactly. But it's funny. One last note on Zelda. We rented a house in a village called Wakefield in Rhode Island with a bunch of my family came up, and I brought my mini NES. And we would be like there'd be nicer. I'm like, where's Dad? Where'd he go? And I go out to this little side house that he would be playing Zelda in. He would just be locked in. Like,
oh man,
completely zero, like focused. And I'm like, Dad, did you beat the game? He's like, I'm getting there.
The Zelda or Link versus Ganon is a classic. That's a classic feud, and I think you've got to side with Link as the underdog, right? Like the physical disparity is so different, and it's not like Mario versus Bowser where like they competed in a bunch of different playing fields, right? There was the Mario Brothers adventures, like Super Mario World, Mario 64, but then they would compete at racing and partying. And Link and Ganon, I don't think were ever like friendly rivals. Like I think it was always just out for blood.
So I think what we can do with TV shows, since we have so many for TV and so many for movies, what we can do is each of us will pick 3 and we'll go in a rotation. So I'll say one, Josh will say one, Dave will say one, and we'll do that.
Great.
And 3 of them each. So we'll pick out our favorite one. So I'll leave. I know there's one that both of you will want to say, so I'll leave it for both of you. But the one that, I mean, there are 2 that pop to mind immediately. And the first one for me is Dwight and Jim on The Office, which is, of the past 20 years, probably one of the most notable rivalries. Because to me, the way I define a rivalry is that both parties are equally invested in it. And each of them have victories. Because as my uncle told me this quote years ago, and it's one of my favorites to use, the hammer and the nail aren't rivals. So they each have to have their victories. So that's why I like the Dwight and the Jim, because Dwight has his victories over Jim. And Jim obviously pranks the living shit out of Dwight to a point where you're almost like, maybe that's a little much. And even Jim realizes that. But it is one of my favorite rivalries on the show.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, okay, yeah. I like some of the pranks, especially. I watched the one the other day where Jim replaces himself with what's the guy's name? The Asian actor that's
Randall Park.
Randall Park, yeah. Randall Park just comes in and automatically, like, all the pictures are updated, the computer's there, and he's like, and then he goes to put in his passcode on his phone, he like covers it up like so no one can see. I think that's one of my favorite jokes that he does with him.
It's the 2 that come to mind are when he sends Dwight faxes from his future self that the coffee is poisoned, and the other one is when Jim. Oh my God, what was it? It's when when he steals his identity. I mean, it's been played out to death on Twitter, but the one where he steals his identity is just a classic. I mean, it is just priceless. The look on Dwight's face and that it's just great. But Josh, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the first few seasons I was like, yeah, that Dwight, he's the weirdo. Jim, that guy's pretty cool. And then you kind of get to a point where you're like, oh, come on, man, stop hitting him. He's already dead. Like Dwight he just wants to sell paper and grow beets. And Jim just like wants to tear Dwight's life apart. And it's like, hey, man, Jim, maybe you should look inside yourself and see what's missing there, you know?
It's true. No, it's true. Maybe Jim needs to do some soul searching himself.
I think so. But I do think it is a very good rivalry.
It's a great one. It's a great one. There are definitely times where you side with each one of them. And I find myself every time I watch the show, I like Dwight more and more, and I side with him more and more. But that's just me. But Josh, what's the next one that you'd like to talk about?
Okay, I'm gonna go Eagleton versus Pawnee. Because it brings to mind another one that's only kind of, that's not really touched on this list, but Eagleton versus, so Pawnee is the town that Parks and Recreation takes place in, and Eagleton is their neighboring town that's better at everything and everyone likes more, which it really echoes a Springfield versus Shelbyville dynamic to me. And I think that's classic. And I love that you get so invested in the characters and the milieu of this like objectively more troubled and less thriving town. And it's not even that the people in Eagleton or Shelbyville are like snobs or jerks. It's just that like Springfield and Pawnee resent them for thinking they are greater than, and like in like the ways that we consider traditional successes being greater than. So I think it's not, as Jacob, as you were saying, it's not kind of the classic rivalry in terms of like wins and losses, but it is like a little brother, big brother rivalry, right? And that like Pawnee just always wants to stick it to Eagleton. It's okay. So this is what I like about it. It mirrors, not to take it out of the kind of film and TV and video games pop culture realm, but it mirrors the Yankees Red Sox rivalry of my youth, where it was a one-sided rivalry where the team that was worse was consumed with beating the team that was better, and the team that was better did not care at all. And that was like when I was in college when the Red Sox won their first World Series in 86 years, right? And so I had gone from age 0 to almost 20 just being like, oh, you lose at everything. and so that I think that the Boston sports experience is a Pawnee Eagleton or of my youth was a Pawnee Eagleton or Springfield Shelbyville experience.
That's on the nose, and that's why I think especially all of us identify with the Pawnee side more than the Eagleton side.
Yeah.
Yes.
And while obviously the wins and losses thing doesn't apply when it comes to the town, but they are definitely both equally invested in that rivalry. They both hate each other.
Yes, that's true. But Eagleton is like, if you were presented with the people of Eagleton, like a series about the people of Eagleton, and you saw their lives and you came to sympathize with their hopes and dreams and their foibles and their loves and losses, you would go like, oh, these people from Pawnee are so cruel, so mean to you. Why would they be like that? But because we're given the frame of reference of the people of Pawnee, we're like, Eagleton, ease up on them. They're trying their best.
That's right.
The way you can tell there's a fierce rivalry is Leslie Knope is like the nicest person in the show, and even she's like, I hate Eagleton.
Yep, that's true.
Even though she's from there, she was born there.
It's true.
She was. That's right. Native of Eagleton, even though she hates to admit it, but it is definitely, when it comes to town versus town, like you said too, it's Springfield, Shelbyville, and it's Pawnee, Eagleton. Like those are like the preeminent, like those are the big town.
I love it.
Rivalries. It's great. No, it's great. It makes, and that's the great thing about Parks. Not to diverge too much, but and I'm not the first person to say it, but the biggest difference between Parks and The Office is Parks does such a great job of establishing the characters outside of Parks and Rec.
Mm-hmm.
Like The Office, it's pretty much The Office.
Yep. And
Parks and Rec, it's such a rich list of side characters, and they establish both towns very well. Obviously, they do Pawnee more, but they establish a lot of Eagleton people, and it's they paint the picture for us that you're not supposed to like them. So
yeah,
that's the great part. But yeah. So Dave,
what do you Pawnee Eagleton rivalry?
Oh, Pawnee, baby, Team Pawnee, Lil Sebastian, number one. Although Dave hates
Sebastian.
Dave hates Lil Sebastian.
Dave is a Ben Wyatt here who never liked Little Sebastian.
He is. He doesn't get it.
I like Cones of Dunshire too. So
love Cones of Dunshire.
You forgot
Cones of Dunshire. That's one of the great TV moments turned meme is like him holding up the Cones of Dunshire board and be like, could a depressed person do this?
Yes. Yes. I also love when he beats the guy from Workaholics and he's like, you forgot about the essence of the game. It's all about the cones. It's so stupid. That's why I love
so good.
I love Ben Wyatt. But Dave, what do you got? What's one of your three?
Well, I was going to save it, but I think this is my favorite one on the entire list for everything. Jerry versus Newman from Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Is the best rivalry. Like, when you rewatch the show, it's amazing the difference in perception you have. Like, originally when you watch it, you're like, Newman is in all of them. And then you go back and watch it again, and you're like, he's really only in, like, not that much. He's in, like, you know, a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there. But he's so funny. Every time he comes in, it's like you start laughing.
He's so funny. It's also like, this is the thing. I'm gonna keep coming back to this with like stuff I've revisited since childhood. But like because it's Seinfeld, you see things through Jerry's eyes, right? And you're like Newman, right? And you're like oh, I hate this mailman. And then as like an adult, I'm like, Jerry, if you're Jerry's mailman, he's probably super annoying.
Oh, for sure. He's so annoying.
Jerry Seinfeld, the character, is an annoying dude.
He's so like neat and clean, has all these rules, and like it's just
it's no surprise to me that they hate each other so much. And
it
is a good point. I mean, if I was Jerry's mailman, I would probably hate him too. And he's always cracking jokes. He's always trying to find something funny to say. And I'm just trying to get along with my daily business. And I'm friends with Kramer, and I'm like, I associate with Jerry just because of him. Like, that's their entire connection is Kramer. And the fact that, I mean, we don't even see him delivering the mail to Jerry. We just know that Newman's there. He lives in the same building. They don't like each other. And I've never actually thought of this before, but I wonder if there's any jealousy at play there. Like one thinks that the other is closer with Kramer than the other person. I wonder if there's any jealousy at play there.
There might be.
But I mean, we talked about this on the podcast before. Jerry is by far the worst actor on the show. Like it's.
Well, I mean, the other actors, right? Like Jason Alexander, tremendous actor. Michael Richards was a great Kramer. Right. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is in my opinion, the all-time greatest television comedy actor. So like, no doubt. And then you're putting a guy who is like a killer stand-up up against like a theater actor, an incredible TV actor, and this guy who comes from like the sketch comedy world, right? It was where Michael Richards like was on Fridays. So he just was like kind of the in the driver's seat of this show, but like against these like heavyweights.
Yeah. And I think the other day I was watching, I forget what episode it was, but the funniest part of this whole rivalry is when Newman starts talking about his job. Like at any point when he starts talking about his job, it's the funniest. Like Jerry's like, no, you can't give up on your dream, Newman. You moving away is my dream too. And he's like, you have to deliver 5 bags of mail in 3 days. We can't do that. And he's like, well, I'll help you. You deliver mail? And he's like, well, I guess it's not that hard.
I think my favorite Newman line is probably when you control the mail, you control information.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
It's just he hams it up and it's so good. He's just, and like Dave said, like you forget how little he's in it, but every time he's on the screen and he just steals.
Yeah, it's all fastballs.
It's fantastic. In the episode where time is going backwards, the one with the Indian wedding, and Franklin and Delano Romanowski, and Newman's like playing like power broker between them. He's so good. I love Wayne Knight.
He's so good. It's sad that those dinosaurs killed him.
It is sad. It is sad, but he had it. I think he might have had it coming in that instant because he was gonna unleash them on the rest of the world, pretty much.
That's like almost a Seinfeld plot.
Yeah.
Like if you were to be like, oh yeah, Newman stole the DNA from a bunch of dinosaurs and was going to sell it. You'd be like, oh yeah, that could be a Seinfeld.
You're like, wait, where's Kramer taking the dinosaur bones or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
He's putting them in the mail truck. He's driving off to the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to be
Kramer has a rival who's a museum curator, and he's trying to build a dinosaur so he has a better museum.
It's an HR Pennypacker storyline too.
Mm-hmm.
He goes in there as HR Pennypacker. Oh.
And you know Kramer just ends up like falling or like blowing his nose and knocking over the whole built dinosaur like in one fell swoop.
Yep.
That's our only complete T-Rex skeleton. And of course, then Kramer would like slip and fall and knock the whole thing down.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let me see. Who do I want to do next? I'm gonna do one that's a little closer to home for me, and it might not be one that Dave has much to say about. But I'm gonna say Fox Mulder versus the Government, which is the X-Files. That's one of my favorite shows. And it's not your traditional rivalry because it's not one-on-one. But for now, Dave, you haven't seen any X-Files, right?
I have not seen 1 second of X-Files.
I will say it is a dedicated watch when you have to watch it because it's a lot of episodes and a lot of mythology.
And they're all over the place too. It's like how I remember Star Trek: The Next Generation, where some of them are like deep and philosophical, and the kind of like weekly adventure is an allegory for this greater power struggle or belief. And then some of them are just like the garbage comes alive at night.
Yeah, no, that is. He's not messing around either. That's
I'm not joking.
Plot lines of an episode of X-Files.
There was a garbage monster that enforced zoning violations.
Yes, that's an actual plot line of one of the X-Files episodes. It's called Arcadia. If you want to watch it, it's a monster of the week, so I won't really reveal anything to you. But Josh is right. There's episodes where it's like very deep exploration of Mulder's sister getting abducted by aliens, and that's like Jersey Devil. Remember that?
Yeah.
Jersey Devil.
Yeah.
Jersey Devil ends up being like,
and it's like.
It's like this like weird like prehistoric Neanderthal type creature, and it's like I defend that episode to the death. Quite honestly, I like the Jersey Devil episode. Not anybody else does. And then Adrian Monk, Tony Shalhoub is in an episode of
Adrian Monk.
He is
Monk comes in.
We love Monk. But
love Monk.
Adrian Monk, Dave, there's an episode where Tony Shalhoub is literally a walking black hole. Like an experiment turned him into a walking black hole. So like his shadow just like consumes people. Literally, it's the weird shit. But anyway, so
they say it's crazy, but I don't think so. That's the theme song to Monk, listeners.
Josh, we are big Monk fans.
My old office mate, shout out to Ben Silva, who I used to work with at Last Week Tonight. We would, I think he started it, but like we'll text every couple months just like lyrics from the theme song to Monk. It's so funny because like you read it in that Randy Newman voice, like they say I'm crazy, but I don't think so. It's like it's a jungle out there, and it's like it's so forceful. It's like such a forceful TV theme song.
And it's funny because I think the first season it was a much more like tempered like theme song. It was a slower kind of a
very slow, yeah.
And then they were like, you know what, screw that, let's just make it
like,
crazy.
People don't know that this show's gonna be fucking balls to the wall, and we need Randy Newman belting it out.
Yeah, Monk will not appear on this list of TV rivalries, but I will say
Monk versus the regular police is a good rivalry.
That is true.
Monk versus Germs too.
Monk versus Germs.
Monk versus person.
I don't think we can. It's quite fair to qualify his obsessive compulsive disorder as a pop culture rivalry, but I do. Monk versus Germs is that's a good way to put that.
It's true. No, it's fair. Except I don't think Monk has won that battle once.
No, but he crushes the police department.
He does.
Oh,
he does.
Yeah. 100%, yeah.
Before we move on, I do want to just say Fox Mulder and the government. He always is on the trail of what he thinks is discovering like alien evidence and the UFOs and the government's infiltrating our daily lives and stuff. And some people may take that stuff too far in real life, but in the show, it's fascinating because I'm not really a big David Duchovny fan. I know that's weird saying outside of the X-Files, it's the biggest thing he's ever done, but it is incredible the lengths that the government goes to in the show to keep him off their trail. And he has multiple informants across the show. They all pretty much get killed because they're informing him on stuff he's not supposed to know. And the mythology towards the later end of the show. Have you seen the entire show, Josh?
No.
So towards the end, the mythology gets really weird. And he leaves the show with 2 seasons to go. He leaves after 7 seasons. He pulls a preemptive Steve Carell on The Office. He leaves after 7 years. But the mythology gets a little wonky towards the end, but the first 4 or 5 seasons of it, it's a really well told story. A lot of backstabbing, a lot of playing people against each other, and it's just a really good conspiracy story. So it's something that I watched the X-Files in record time, even though it takes a long time to watch that.
It's also Mulder versus the government is it's such a tension that I think is really relevant to the present day, right? Of not trusting the story the government is telling, right? And I think that there's lots of different kinds of conspiracies, some actual and some invented for comfort and a sense of stability in an unstable world. But I think that tension is really interesting because Mulder is so clearly onto something. So him taking on the U.S. government is really compelling because again, it's an underdog story and the underdog is right.
Yeah. Not to mention he works for the U.S. government. He's an agent. So it's incredible. But Josh, you are up. What would you like to discuss?
I would like to discuss, okay. Maybe I'll do for my last one, the next one I'm thinking of, but, we've talked a little Simpsons. Homer Simpson versus Ned Flanders is an incredible. This is so central to my youth. Homer Simpson, a slob, a increasingly bad father over the years, right? At first he was kind of an overwhelmed man prone to rage who loved his family, and then kind of became a little meaner over time. And Ned Flanders was his perfect foil, who was always calm. Was sexy in his skiing gear. And I think just that rivalry, there's something so interesting to me about Ned Flanders. He's good. He's so good, but you don't like him. And you don't like him, I think, in part, not because you think he's bad, but because he makes Homer worse. He brings out the worst in Homer. And I think that's so sympathetic to have a rival that is good and that just makes you feel so bad.
I will admittedly, I have not watched a lot of The Simpsons, but
wow, okay.
Isn't Homer responsible for Flanders' wife's death?
I like vaguely right there at a NASCAR event, and she gets hit by a tire because he's like messing around. Yeah, but this is, I mean, before that, right. there's years and years already of rivalry with them, right. And it's Homer has the tendency to like wreak death and destruction wherever he goes inadvertently. Homer versus Frank Grimes, who dies.
That's a dark episode too.
A dark episode,
real dark.
But Homer versus Flanders, it's like so clearly Flanders is a more capable father and like a more generous person. But the thing that gets my heart is like, you want Homer to be better, and Ned Flanders just reminds him of like his own flaws, and I think that's so tragic.
That is pretty tragic. That's the thing about The Simpsons. Like, I know it's a much more layered show, and it's a much more like rich writing and stuff, and that's why it always shames me. Now, I will say this with the caveat: I don't think the show is better than The Simpsons, but I've always liked Family Guy better, and I think the Rhode Island connection there is probably why.
I understand that. I do think The Simpsons is better, but I understand feeling a pride in Family Guy. And the Family Guy, there are so many great jokes over the years.
Yeah. And Family Guy didn't make this list because Peter versus the chicken probably isn't exactly the greatest rivalry in the world other than Homer and Ned. But I would actually say the best rivalry on that show is probably Brian versus Quagmire. That's probably the best show, best rivalry on that show, because they hate each other. But yeah, Homer versus Ned is a classic one. I mean, it's one that if you ask people what's the best cartoon rivalry ever, they would probably say Homer and Ned. I mean, they might say Kyle and Cartman, they might say something like that, but
Kyle and Cartman,
Ned and Homer's is probably the best one. I mean, you could argue that Rick and Morty are rivals themselves, but you know,
and I like that formulation.
No, I was watching that last night. Rick Sanchez is one of the hardest characters to like. He really is. He's just such an asshole.
He's a monster.
One of the worst people ever, but he's also like one of the smartest people ever. It's a very interesting dichotomy. But Homer and Ned, a great breakdown there, because Dave and I would have been lost on that one. So thank you for the expert.
I'm just old. That's all.
No, come on. I mean, The Simpsons appeals to so many generations. Like, there's no excuse that Dave and I couldn't have watched The Simpsons. It's just that.
That's true. It has existed continuously.
I will say Dave watches a hell of a lot more TV than I do. But Dave, it is who is your second rivalry on TV?
Boy, I think I'm gonna have to kind of stay in the sort of like the Seinfeld family. I'm gonna go Larry David versus Mocha Joe from this season.
All right.
Josh, I don't know if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, but
I'm less of a completist with Curb.
Yeah,
than with Seinfeld.
This past season was so funny. Oh my god! The whole season is based on Larry David opening up a coffee shop right next to his friend, in spite of him, because he didn't apologize for his coffee. So like he literally just opens up the whole 10 episodes is people opening up stores next to their rivals just to run them out of business unless they get an apology.
That's so funny.
It's the most petty thing of all time, which is peak Seinfeld, Larry David, everything.
Peak Curb, peak Seinfeld for sure. Just Seinfeld. The tagline for both of those shows could just be "It's the principle of the thing."
It really is. I'm
pretty sure that's actually said on Seinfeld at one point too.
I think they do say it, but that's like the whole series, right? It's just like them standing on principle of like, but it should be this way. And like Curb just takes that to the next level of like Larry David having this idea of the way the world should work and adhering to that rather than the way the world does work.
And the ironic part is pretty much just Larry David. Like, that's what he wants. Yes. Like, I just want it my way. I don't give a shit about anybody else. I want my way.
Yeah.
And I think one of the peak things too from Seinfeld is when George is pitching the sitcom with Jerry and he's like, no, nothing happens. Like, that's Larry David writing these shows. Like, nothing happens and no one learns anything. That's how it works.
No one learns any lessons and no hugs, right? That was Larry David's mantra on Seinfeld.
That is the Seinfeld ethos. No hugs, no learning. And it's true. Like they get close to it at some point, but then you just yank it right away every time.
That's kind of what I love. I don't mean to spoil. Have you guys seen the movie Young Adult with Charlize Theron?
I have not.
A friend of mine was tweeting about it the other day, and it is like, to me, it's a movie about someone who like refuses to learn in a way that like you don't see in a movie that often. And I kind of like that. It was like a Curb or Seinfeld, like aesthetic and ethos, like carried through, and then for the length of a movie, which is interesting.
Interesting.
Anyway,
check it out. Yeah. It's a good recommendation.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Kind of an unsung sometimes. Anyway, sorry. That's You're saying Mocha Joe versus Larry David.
It really does capture the entire philosophy of Larry David right there.
It's the principle of the thing.
It really is.
It really is. And I remember showing it to, I forget, it was one of my friends the first time, and his first comment was, we watched the episode was, "Oh my God, Larry David is out of his mind. I hate that guy." And I was just like, I think that's how a lot of people feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's one I know Dave is probably going to save for his last one. So I'm going to leave it for him because it's a good way to wrap up TV. So I'm going to briefly touch on Dan Egan versus Jonah Ryan, which is from Veep.
Yeah. So there's two Veep ones on here. Yes. Dan versus Jonah and Selena versus the presidency, right? We're on your list. Yes. And Dan and Jonah, it rules. It's so funny and great.
Jonah Ryan is the king of quotes that I love that I can't say on my podcast. But
yeah,
there are the hardest I've laughed at that show is when he opens his mouth. He is so damn funny, and he's like the worst person ever. But so is Dan. Like they're all really bad people.
They're all horrible. Yeah,
there really isn't. I'm trying to think. Like maybe Mike McClintock is like the one.
No, he stinks. He's like trying to get rid of that boat. Like he stinks too.
To be fair though, he is like the only one that ends up in the positive at the end of the show. Like everybody else's legacies are ruined or they've settled for something worse, and then he's like working at CNN or some shit. Like he's actually doing well for himself. But Dan Egan versus Jonah Ryan is great because it's one of those rivalries where like you really don't want to side with either of them. You like it when both of them lose. Like when Dan loses, I'm like, that's great. Like Dan's so slimy, such an asshole. But like Jonah's like, you know what? Like whatever. He deserves to lose. He's a, as I believe The Ringer used recently the term fail son. He's had pretty much a lot handed to him in life, and he's never really done anything with that privilege. So it's great to see both of them lose, and Jonah essentially getting bullied into being the vice president and getting impeached at the end of it. And then he ends up like settling and leaving politics and becoming like this slimy real estate salesman or whatever. But every one of their interactions, they live to one up each other, and that is a great rivalry when both people just suck.
Yep, they're ruthless towards each other. God, so good, such great characters. I briefly met Timothy Simons last year, who couldn't be nicer. Yeah. Sweetest guy, which is so funny because Jonah, also a New England guy, I think he's from Maine. That's right. But Jonah is just like the scuzziest, cruelest, dumbest monster.
Oh, he's the worst. He is the worst. But also a rare occurrence of a New England boy in real life and New England boy on the show because he's from New Hampshire on Veep.
Oh yeah,
that's where he runs for the House of Representatives. But just to touch on before we move back to you, Josh, Selena versus the presidency is one that Dave came up with, and that is classic because it's true. Like it's one of those rivalries where it's like it's not a real person, but it's like that is something she has fought for, and she lost.
It's her white whale.
Yeah, it is, and then finally she wins. I loved how Veep ended. That like she had to fight, and then finally it got there, and it's one of the best told stories over 7 seasons I think I've ever seen.
Veep is so good.
Great stuff. Dave's what's going off.
Okay.
It's back to you.
Back to me?
Back to you, sir.
Okay. I will say, so I want to shout out, because my wife Maris and I are watching Cheers lately. I want to shout out Diane versus Carla, which is a great rivalry. I think it's very funny, very even. Like they're on a level playing field socially, and I like that a lot. But I think one that really like took over a period of my life, and I'm sorry if this is the one you were going to take, Dave, is Walter White versus Gus Fring. Was that the one?
Okay, that's my Breaking Bad's my favorite show.
It's great. I mean, yeah. I like don't evangelize about it because everything has been said, but like Walter White versus Gus Fring, it's almost Homer versus Ned Flanders, but with meth, right? Like Gus Fring is so careful and methodical, and he doesn't want, he just wants to keep his hands clean. He's still hurting a lot of people, but he's trying to do everything with like the least violence and chaos possible. And Walter White is just like a pure agent of chaos and violence and malice. And it's such a, their characters are so opposite, and like Walter defeating Gus kind of feels like a victory, but also just feels like this, like a boundary has been crossed, right? Like he's done things that you're like, oh, you're a morally worse person than I even realized, and I already thought you were a monster. And I think that's just such a like incredible storytelling. The way like Gus is introduced for like numerous episodes before you really know like the extent of his power and capacity. I just think it's great. It's like such a great, like season 4 of Breaking Bad leading up to the Walter Gus confrontation is like so tense. I watched seasons 3 and 4. I caught up in a week on both of those seasons before season 5 started, that I watched while it was on live. Mm-hmm. And it was maybe the most depressed I've ever been, just because that show is so bleak. And like I would watch like 4 episodes a day, and then I would go out to do stand up, and on the train downtown from my apartment to shows, I would just be like, why do I think nothing's good?
It's true. And it's a completely different plane than Dan Egan and Jonah Ryan, but it's the same idea that they're both such horrible people.
Yes.
Walter.
Right. Because Gus is not himself a good person. He's just like, just in contrast to Walter, who is just such a ruthless and completely unprincipled operator. Like you almost have respect for like the kind of genteel code that Gus operates under, even though it's what he's doing is so destructive. But like when Walter comes into contact with him, you're like, oh, this is another level of evil.
And before I toss it to you, Dave, I think one of my favorite things about that like last 4 episodes of season 4 is it feels like, and I've never watched the show, so I'm just relying on Dave to agree with me here. It feels like you're watching an episode 24 where it's like a running clock. It feels like you're watching Walter White in real time. Like, count down. Like, we are going to get killed by this man. Like, we are out of options. He's going to murder me. I have to get him before he can get me. And ultimately, what does Gus in is vengeance. Like, that's what, like, and just like lording over Tio Salamanca over there. And that's what gets him in the end. He gives into his vengeance, gives into his hatred, and that's what ends up taking his life. But it's such a great arc, and they're both such god awful people that when you feel like you're rooting for one of them, you're like, I feel dirty inside. Like I don't want to root for Walter White. He's a piece of shit too. He's a murderer. Like
he's horrible.
He's horrible.
Truly a horrible man and an incredible character.
Oh my god, it's fantastic. But David, is your favorite show? I know that.
Yeah, bring us home, Dave.
It is.
Like Michael Bolton and Jack Sparrow, bring us home.
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite. And I think one interesting thing too is you're kind of torn originally because the first season and a half or so, Walt is like a good guy at first. Like he's got the cancer, you feel for him. He's trying to make money for his family. He's not really hurting anyone at the time. He's trying to protect everyone. And then all of a sudden the light switch goes off. And all of a sudden what makes the show so good, I think, is you can cut the tension with a knife, like in the middle of season 3 on. Because everything is just building up and it's ready to boil over at any second. You have no idea what's going to come. And you have no idea at what lengths they're going to take it to.
Yep. And even season 1, where he's doing bad things, right? Like they dissolve the guy in the bathtub in episode 3, I think. And it's just like, whoa, this is the ride I'm on. And it's so, but you go, oh, this is a guy who's trying to provide for his family, and he's in over his head and he's doing bad things, but like maybe he can right the ship. And then it gets to the point where like, oh, this is like a pirate ship and he's the captain of it. And it can't go right because he wants to do evil. And it's like, as opposed to like feeling cornered into doing evil. And it's like so fascinating. And man, it's really good. What else can you say about Breaking Bad? They got it right. People get it. You know,
other than it's amazing. There's nothing else.
It's really good.
So we'll do the same format for movies. Before we cross over to movies, I'm just going to run down the ones that we didn't touch on, but people either submitted or would be like, "Why the hell didn't you talk about that?" So 11 versus the Upside Down, Stranger Things, Daredevil versus Kingpin in Daredevil, Michael versus Toby, Betty versus Veronica. Matt Enright submitted that one. Goku versus Vegeta. I don't watch Dragon Ball Z. I'm so sorry, but Matt submitted that one as well. The Jennings versus the FBI on The Americans. Tony Soprano versus his entire family on The Sopranos. The Gang versus the McPoyles on Sunny. And I believe the Happy versus the McCoys, which is just one you have to put on there because they're like the original TV rivalry. But so there's movies. We can do the roundabout for 3, and then we'll call it a night. So I will start off. My first one, and I'm not sure if this. I know Dave probably wouldn't bring this up. I'm not sure if Josh would, but I feel like Obi-Wan versus Anakin has to be one of the rivalries in the list. It's either Luke versus Darth Vader or Anakin versus Obi-Wan, and you can kind of talk about them in the same breath. But I just love Ewan McGregor so much that I love how he acts in those movies. And Hayden Christensen, God bless him, but he's a horrible actor, especially in the second movie. Like, he's god awful in those movies. He's not very good. He's better in the third one. Have you seen the prequels, Josh?
I've seen the first one and then scattered bits. So I saw Phantom Menace in theaters, and then I kind of fell off of the next two, which where was it? Attack of the Clones and
Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith.
Right. So the second one is the worst Star Wars movie I've seen. It's terrible. There's really nothing redeeming about it, and it's Hayden Christensen's debut. He's terrible. His acting is awful. And then the third one, he's a little bit better, but Ewan McGregor still acts circles around him. But it's a great rivalry because it persists through to the first Star Wars movie, obviously, because they have the fight that's actually pretty bad, but they fight each other in the hallway. And while he's bringing him up, he raises him as a Padawan. He's teaching him all through life. And you can tell that I don't know who said it, what podcast I was listening to, but he viewed Qui-Gon Jinn more as a father figure, while Obi-Wan was more of a brother. So there was always that tension between them. Do you have a brother, Josh? Do you have any siblings?
I don't. I have one sister.
Okay, Dave, you don't have a brother either, so I guess I'm the only really point of view on this one. But I have 2 older brothers, and there's a rivalry there. Like, you always want to one up each other. You want to feel like you're the better brother or whatever. So there's always that rivalry between brothers, and usually you don't end up killing that brother, but Anakin Skywalker is kind of a psychopath. But this is one of those classic ones. It's one that you can't not talk about when you're talking about movie rivalries. Like, these are the two. And then Luke and Darth Vader, obviously, too. So, like, those two are, I feel like you can't separate them in Star Wars. That's just me.
I love it.
That's me.
Great rivalries. Well, Star Wars is full of great rivalries.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's hard. You could do a whole episode on just Star Wars rivalries. The whole one.
I agree.
But, Dave, you haven't seen a single Star Wars movie, have you?
I have not.
That's okay.
I've seen most of them, but like I the way I see them is like I feel like to say I'm a fan of Star Wars is like that's so loaded because the big fans know so much about the history and are so intimately familiar with the films. For me, I think other than Force Awakens, not Force Awakens, other than Phantom Menace, which I didn't like very much. I think I've liked all the other ones that I've seen, which is most of them, but I don't remember. Like, I saw definitely saw Force Awakens, Rogue One, and Last Jedi in theaters, and was like, every time I walked up being like, what a pleasant 2 hours that was. So much adventure, but I can't tell you anything about any of those 3 movies.
Right. No, it's fair. It's fair. It's a lot to absorb. There's a lot of lore.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a miracle what I do. It really is.
But the people that I think are really into it are really into that lore and really into the like intricacies of it. Where I'm just like, Okay, Adam Driver is like texting with his mind. Cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've seen all of them but the newest 3, the 7, 8, and 9. I haven't seen those yet.
Oh, wow.
But they've all pretty much been spoiled for me on Twitter. Thank you so much. Everybody.
Yeah.
Videos and bootleg stuff in the theater. Thank you so much to all those great people. But I won't bore anybody with my half-assed Star Wars logic anymore. The water went down the wrong pipe. Josh, it is your turn.
Great. I'm going by the list. And I think a great rivalry, a movie that might be unsung currently that I loved so much as when I saw it, and like I thought it had a lot of rewatch value, is Zoolander versus Hansel. I think I really like a great film comedy in my memory, a great character, Zoolander, and a great foil, Hansel, right? Who's so hot right now. And then I'm such a sucker for rivals who end up working together to defeat a common enemy. So I think like the tension between them is great. Their coming together is great for a greater cause to defeat Will Ferrell. I love it. I just like the walk off with Billy Zane is so fun. It's like a really wonderfully constructed rivalry. And Zoolander and David, what's that?
David Bowie was
and
there.
David Duchovny. David Bowie. Yes.
Yeah.
Was David Duchovny? No.
He might have been
what
in
movie?
It too. I know David
What
Bowie
was the movie where he had like his hand in a jar? Let me look. Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, but Bill, while you're looking that up, Zoolander and Hansel, I don't know how you pronounce it in the movie, but Zoolander and Hansel, they're great. I mean, I don't like Owen Wilson that much, but that's another thing I like is when actors I don't really like that much do a role that I find charming.
It's very charming.
Nice. Yeah. He's very good in that movie.
Very good. Really funny.
And it's Ben Stiller is hit or miss when it comes to leading roles. But this was a hit by far. He was great. And I mean, the what is this, a center for ants? And the files were, the files were in the computer.
And the computer is like an all-time silly movie joke. It's so many great silly jokes.
That's great.
And so specific, like Zoolander is such its own thing, which I love about it. You know what I mean? It's not like regular people in a wacky situation. It's like this wildly heightened character with a wildly heightened rival and then a super wacky heightened nemesis. And I just like love that. I mean, I just like I haven't seen it in so long. So maybe there's parts that don't hold up as much, but I just like their rivalry of like aging nobody model who is like his best days are behind him, even though he objectively is like basically the same. And then like new hot guy that everybody likes more for reasons that are kind of inexplicable is like a really great rivalry.
It really is so stupid. And I haven't seen it in full in a long time because it's not really on TV like ever. But unlike Meet the Parents, which is on like every other 5 seconds.
All the time, yeah.
Zoolander's great, and also shout out and rest in peace, Jerry Stiller. He has a great role in that movie as well.
Yeah, rest in peace. Jerry Stiller's great.
Jerry Stiller's fantastic. Everything he does, he's great. But yeah, Zoolander and Hansel, fantastic. Dave, what do you got?
All right, so there's a lot of good ones on this list. I think movies is by far the deepest list we have here.
I'm
gonna go with my favorite though. Happy Gilmore versus Shooter McGavin. It's just how do you not like that rivalry is just so great. That whole movie is made on the concept of that rivalry, really. I mean, the whole thing is you hate Shooter McGavin and you love Happy Gilmore. Like, there's no in between. Like, it's not like where we talked about Breaking Bad where you kind of like Walt and then you despise Walt and you hate Gus and you like Gus and it's like it's a roller coaster and by then you hate everybody. Like Happy Gilmore, you like him more as the movie goes on.
Yes.
And it's just it's an incredible story about one guy that just has no idea what he's doing and gets a professional golfer.
Yep. It's in that like slobs versus snobs tradition, right? Where like there isn't really any ambiguity. Like Adam Sandler as Happy Gilmore is a flawed character, but like ultimately he's trying to save his grandmother, right, from the nursing home run by an evil Ben Stiller. And Shooter McGavin is like in his way, and he's a dick. It's not like Eagleton Pawnee or Shelbyville Springfield, where like they're pitted against each other and you just hate them because they're the rivals. It's like Shooter McGavin is empirically a bad dude. He's so hateable. Like, you eat pieces of shit for breakfast is like the funniest joke. Still, it's so stupid. Like, a piece of shit like you for breakfast.
I like go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, the one of my favorites is the I got on this tour for one reason, money. Now I got a new reason, kicking your ass. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's such a great. It is one of the best. One of the best. And it's hard to make a rivalry great when it's in just one storyline, like Zoolander and Hansel, which I guess there is a second Zoolander, but we don't talk about that. But there is just one Happy Gilmore, and to make a rivalry so memorable when it's only in one movie, unlike a series like Thanos and the Avengers or something like that, when it's just self-contained in one movie, that's impressive. And that's what I think makes this stand the test of time.
Agreed. And that actor, no matter what he's in, I'm like, oh, that's Shooter McGavin.
Yeah.
He's forever Shooter McGavin.
Forever Shooter McGavin.
Forever. Do you know that Kevin Costner was considered for that role?
No, I think he would have been good too.
And I think he did Tin Cup the same year, so he's like, I don't want to be typecast.
Oh, that's funny. As the golf guy, yeah.
But yes,
so when that came out, I was like a kid, and I listened to a lot of morning radio, and I would call in for the contests, and I won tickets to the Boston, like the downtown Boston premiere of Tin Cup, but it was rated R, and I couldn't go because I was like 9.
That sucks.
So silly.
That would have been great. Oh man,
would have been fun.
That is rough. Damn, Dave probably took what was going to be my next one. So I'm going to go with, you know what? I'm just going to go with a safe one. I got to go with Batman and the Joker. Like, it's a classic.
Mm-hmm.
It is like one of the all-time rivalries. And I mean, I'm mostly talking about The Dark Knight, obviously, but there's plenty of, like Mask of the Phantasm with the animated show and the animated series. And the comic books, like, it spans so much in the video games too, like in the Arkham games. So like really it spans all 3 of these categories. But I mean, are there 2 more recognizable rivals in like the history of pop culture? Like, it's Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. It's Batman and the Joker. Like, those are your, like, it's the complete polar opposites. Like, order versus chaos, law versus crime. Like, they are the complete diametric opposites, and it's really what makes them great rivals. And it's been said about Batman before, it's not a unique take, but really one can't survive without the other. Like, one exists because of the other. Like, the Joker and his crime embodies why Batman does what he does, but the Joker does what he does because he wants to thwart people like Batman, and that's what makes great rivals.
Yeah, I also think that in the Dark Knight specifically, and I'm less of a completist with the Batman canon, but in the Dark Knight, not specifically, but that's my touchstone for it. The Joker brings out the things about Batman that are bad, right? Because like Batman, as much as he is a perfectionist, he is a flawed character, or the character is a flawed person in that he is, he has this code, he doesn't use guns, but he's still very violent, and he still like kind of protects the letter of the law. And the Joker kind of like kind of holds a mirror up to like, oh, look, there are these gray areas, and like I'm exploiting them in a way that's grotesque and violent and dangerous, but there are lots of flaws with the way Batman operates as well. And even I think those flaws are like magnified in Dark Knight Rises, which like the theme of which in the end is like, you've got to just trust the NYPD, right? Like, they'll get it right. And it's like, okay, are you sure you don't want to check your work on them being always right? So I think like Batman's like trust for authoritarianism is really underscored by the Joker's chaos, right? Because the Joker brings out the most authoritarian, like, letter of the law following in Batman.
It's true.
Anyway,
that's Dave. You have I know Dark Knight Rises, your preferred film. But
really,
your thoughts that Dave loves, but it's his favorite movie. It's favorite.
I think the best rivalry, obviously, I think the best performance in any of the three movies, the Nolan trilogy, is obviously Heath Ledger as Joker. Like, it's obviously hands down performance. But
he was so good as the Joker that everyone after him thought that they could win an Oscar by playing the Joker.
And it also ruined the entire DC universe because everybody tried to be gritty just like Christopher Nolan, and nobody succeeded because there's one Christopher Nolan. That's not going to work.
But and he matched up a perfect cast with the roles. Like that's such an important part, I think, that people overlook. Like, they just think they can copy and paste it because it's like certain theme or script. Like, you need the actual casting to be spot on. Like, Christian Bale was very good, and Heath Ledger is an all-time performance. That's something we're still talking about years later.
He's great.
The opening sequence in that movie is like one of the best. The bank robbery at the very beginning is like one of the greatest opening sequences. It's just like, I think it was all released as a trailer online, and I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's balls to the wall. It's great.
Yeah.
But Josh, you are up next. If you have
okay. I'm going to go. I feel like to just go silly, which is like my inclination, it does a lot injustice to some of the real great rivalries. So I'm going to go Rocky Balboa, Apollo Creed.
Classic.
I think that it's classic. There's so much to talk about, right? In the original Rocky, the rivalry is such that just for Rocky to be in the same breath as Apollo Creed is a victory for him, right? Which is like such a wonderful piece of character driven writing, that it's not that he has to be a better boxer. It's just that he has to be worthy to contend for the title. And I think that that's like a really great thing about the original Rocky. And then he beats him and they become close friends, and he avenges him against Ivan Drago. And then, okay, so we fast forward 20, 30, 25 years, and then Creed is so incredible, which is like the next, it's a rivalry that then exists across generations, a rivalry that spans a friendship that crosses generations, which I think is like very, and Creed is so good. I haven't seen the second one. The first Creed is so good, and so I don't like. I think that the way that the arc of that rivalry over years, which isn't just like, Holmes and Moriarty is a great rivalry that's on the list to pick from, but that is kind of a replication. That it's like a cat and mouse over and over, and this is like an evolution that spans decades and a father-son relationship that you don't see, and there's like this surrogate father relationship. I just think like great rivalry turned alliance.
And spans multiple movies, and I think the underlying theme of any rivalry is the respect you have for someone else. Like Apollo and Rocky respect each other so much.
Yes,
that's a good point. That's a good point. That actually,
and Rocky has to earn his respect. It's not like, it's not that they are positioned as equals to begin with, right? Like Rocky is not his equal as a fighter and an athlete, and he has to like bring himself into his rival's level.
That's true. It is a fantastic one, because I feel like a lot of the ones we've talked about too aren't really underscored by a mutual respect. Like there's a lot where it's hatred, or it's, you want to beat the best or something like that. But this is one where there is a mutual respect there. And it's earned, like you said, Josh. Like he needs to earn that respect. It's not just given to him. He needs to work his way up, and it is fantastic. And like both of you said, it spans multiple movies, multiple generations, and that is really the mark of a great rivalry. It's probably one of the best sports movie rivalries ever, if not the best. So it's definitely up there. It's a great one.
All right, so what is it? Is it my turn?
It is your turn, Dave.
All right. This is a tough one. I was gonna try to go just Adam Sandler ones, just to screw around and make it interesting, but I think I only have one more. I'm gonna go Billy Madison versus Eric from the company. I love that performance by that guy when he's like poking the holes in Billy Madison's face and moving them through the desk. And I think Adam Sandler in that movie is just such a funny character. When he's talking about like in the hallway, he's like, "Hey, Sideburns, you want some of that milk?" And he's like, "I'd rather have a beer." It's like one of my favorite lines from that movie.
I like you went off the board there. Billy Madison and Eric weren't on the board, but I do like it. I don't know if it's one of my favorites, but I do. I think, oh my God, Bradley Whitford as Eric is he's very good. He's a great villain. He's just such a snarky asshole, and he can play that role very well. But it's not quite Shooter McGavin level, but it's still very good.
Yeah,
those early Sandler films where he played kind of like a wounded, rageful man, just like trying to learn how to exist in the world, and like the villains and his rivals were like competent, put together adults. There's something like it's I think a testament to the like appeal and charisma of Adam Sandler that those movies work at all, because it would be so easy to play Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore, the characters, as like completely unworthy of affection and being rooted for. And you know, they kind of stack, especially in Happy Gilmore, they stack the deck where like the thing he's working towards is like so selfless that you have to be on his side. Right. But and then I think they kind of go the other way in Billy Madison, where Bradley Whitford is like such a dickhead.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And we did an episode a few weeks ago, Josh, about Adam Sandler movies, and we talked about Happy Gilmore. And it is true how you empathize with him in some of these roles where he's playing just a total idiot. But it's the reason why I hate Mr. Deeds. I hate that movie because I think that it takes what he does well and just dials it up to an intolerable level, where it's like, okay, so he's this, he's this great, helpful guy. He helps the old guy across the street, but he's also really benevolent. He also gives people money, and he's also this and that. And it just feels like way too much to believe. And that says a lot when you suspend disbelief for Adam Sandler movies. And still but I'm getting sidetracked. But Billy Madison, Eric, I think what you said, Josh, is astute. He's just such an asshole that you can't help but root for Billy Madison.
Yep.
He's just so bad. Oh, I love it. All right, so my last one. This is tough because there's a few on here I could talk about, but I'm not really familiar with. So I'm going to stick with my strengths or lack thereof. I got to go with Professor X and Magneto. That's probably the one I can speak to the most in terms of they've done that. I mean, that also applies to TV because the X-Men, the animated series, is very good as well. But the rivalry between first Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen and then Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy, they're great. They're all fantastic in those roles. And we all know the X-Men is this, allegory for civil rights and for, people being looked at as different and being, marginalized and all that stuff. And it's such a great story to tell. And both of their sides, it's one of those rivalries where it's not to make too topical a reference, but it's almost like a Hamilton Burr type situation. They started out as friends. They grew up as friends. They were on the same side. And then they just split into rivals. They split with differing opinions, and they didn't exactly get the other person killed. But Magneto, at least in the movie canon, is responsible for paralyzing Professor X. But it is such a great rivalry because it goes back to that respect. Like, they do at least respect each other. They might not get along. They might not agree on really anything, but they do respect each other. And I mean, they play chess together and all this shit, but it is good to see that those two who are so diametrically opposed, but they still have that mutual respect for each other. I think that's what makes it such a long-lasting rivalry. And also, they're just badass characters too, so that works in their favor as well. I love it.
Great. It's great.
No, it's fantastic.
Is it me?
I think it is you. Yes.
All right.
You're last one, Josh.
Last one. I'm going to go another classic. I'm trying to dip into different genres. Capulets and Montagues. A thing that is great about Romeo and Juliet is that you don't really need to know why they hate each other. And I think that's like this Shakespeare, pretty good writer, because you get they go, okay, these families are at war, and it's such that like 2 teenagers die, and you're like, I guess, wow, yikes. And you're never like, wait a minute, what are their parents mad at? It's, it's like kind of glossed over, and you just kind of get the heat of this family rivalry. And I think the history of it is not important. You really just see how it manifests in these 2 like 14-year-olds over like a week. And I think that's one of the things about that movie and the movie and obviously the play that is like so interesting and successful, that they, 2 households, both alike in dignity, in Fair Verona, where we lay our scene, and you're just like, that's you get like a sonnet of backstory, and then it's just off to the races. These families hate each other, and it's not like Hatfields and McCoys where you see like generations of like of family involved in this combat. You just see this like quick snapshot of how this kind of like family feud can manifest in such like a devastating way. So I think that where we get these other rivalries where so much about them and you see them from beginning to end. I love about Romeo and Juliet that you're seeing just like the absolute low point of this rivalry between 2 families.
No, it's great. No, it's not. I'm sorry that we're going a little long on you, Josh. I'm sorry about that.
I've been talking a lot.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry. I just looked at the time and I'm like, holy shit, we are eating into his entire Thursday night.
That's all right.
Dave, your last rivalry for the night.
I will. I'll go with Peter LaFleur and White Goodman because I watched Dodgeball the other night. Classic. And I love that one. I think Vince Vaughn's performance, like early on, especially, is so funny. Like they're in such different places. Like White is so stuck up and thinks he's got all the answers, and Peter's like literally doesn't care. And he's like, my favorite quote is, what's Ben Stiller's wife's name?
Christine Taylor is what her name is in real life.
Yeah, Christine Taylor, but she plays the banker, and she comes in and she's like, do you not have a filing system? Like, or do you collect memberships, or do you just like give up? And he's like, well, I find if you don't have a goal in life, you can never be disappointed. It's like, wow. That's the most depressingly sad excuse for an answer, but
that's a kind of like, answer.
Yeah, it's such a funny like principle as far as like the whole gym, and like all of them are kind of like this band of almost like losers that like don't really have anywhere to go and don't have anyone like they care about or care about them. And it's very funny. And then Patch the Houlihan comes in. Like I think overall that whole thing of like that rivalry between the 2 gyms of basically it's like what everyone thinks of as the gym is like Globo Gym, which is like all these stuck up people and like look at all the weight I can lift. And the other one, which is like the other thought process, like I'm gonna go to the gym, but I'm not gonna do anything.
Yeah.
It's the Pawnee Eagleton of gyms.
It is. It
really is. The haves and the have-nots. So before we go, just running down the ones that if people are listening and they're like, what the fuck? Why didn't we talk about those? Also run them down. Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, Thanos and the Avengers, Superman and Lex Luthor, Maverick and Iceman, Woody and Buzz, Humans versus Aliens. That applies to like a billion different movies. The Keller Sisters, that's a league of their own. Thor and Loki, Freddy versus Jason, Sherlock and Moriarty, Josh did allude to that one. Edward and Jacob of Twilight fame, classic. Commodus and Maximus, The Americans and the Russians, and Miracle, Mozart and Salieri, Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy, shout out Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy, Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence, Dale and Brennan, Annie and Helen, that's Bridesmaids, Marty and Biff, Katie Heron and Regina George, Ron Burgundy versus both Wes Mantooth and Veronica Corningstone, Neo and Agent Smith, Michael Myers and Laurie Strode, Ricky Bobby and John Gerard, which probably would have been my next one if we did another one, Captain America and Iron Man, T-Rex and the Raptors, shout out Jurassic Park, my favorite movie, Jets versus Sharks, and Alien versus Predator as well. But that is pop culture rivalries. Josh, of Desus Mero fame, of Last Week Tonight fame, of Nice Try fame, of Make My Day fame. He made our day by coming on here.
Thank you for having me.
Where can we
find
him?
Fame?
Where can we find you other than all those things I just said? Where can we find you?
I'm at joshgondelman.com. I don't know how to fucking website. That's how old I am. I think a website is an Instagram handle. I'm joshgondelman.com is my website. I'm at Josh Gondelman on Twitter and Instagram. My Nice Try is the book. If you want to read it, Make My Day is the podcast. It's a comedy game show with one contestant, so the contestant always wins. And then watch Desus Mero on Showtime Sundays and Thursdays at 11.
Hell yeah. That's right.
Thanks for having me.
Josh, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Dave, where can we find you?
At David_Albiani.
I'm at Jacob_Morocco. The podcast, SCSL Podcast on Twitter. You can find us there. We're doing 90s baseball draft next week, so be in touch on that one. We'll post more updates as we get along, and we will talk to you guys next week. Pop Culture Rivalries, that was the episode this week, episode 155. Thank you for listening. Perfect.
Thank you.
Josh, thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was a great